What do you do when the most feared being in the galaxy stands before you, and everyone else runs? Marcus Chen had exactly 3 seconds to decide, and his choice would change to worlds forever. The alarms screamed through the Celestial Garden station, red emergency lights strobing across the pristine biodomes that housed Earth's most precious botanical specimens. And Marcus looked up from the orchid he'd been carefully repotting to see them 7 elite Vanguard guards in full combat armor. The kind of soldiers who could take down combat mechs with their bare hands, sprinting past his greenhouse like terrified children. Containment breach. Sector 9. One shouted without stopping. She's loose. Evacuate now. Marcus's hands, still covered in soil, trembled slightly as he set down the delicate flower. He'd worked on this station for 3 years, maintaining the gardens that produced oxygen for 10,000 residents, and he'd never seen the guards run from anything. Then he felt a wave of pressure, like the air before a lightning strike, making his teeth ache and his skin prickle. The greenhouse door exploded inward, not with force, but with a pulse of pure silver light that dissolved the molecular locks like sugar in rain. She stood in the doorway, and Marcus understood instantly why the guards had fled. She looked human at first glance, devastatingly beautiful with high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of winter storms, but those eyes were wrong. Pupils dilating and contracting independently, randomly, like her body couldn't remember how to be human. Her ears rose to delicate points, the only obviously alien feature, but it was the energy radiating from her skin that made his hindbrain scream danger. Silver light pulls beneath her flesh and arrhythmic waves, crackling at her fingertips where she gripped the doorframe hard enough to leave melted handprints in the steel. She wore what looked like medical containment clothing, tactical pants, and a fitted gray top, both singed at the edges from whatever power coursed through her. Her hair, long and the color of starlight, floated around her head as if she were underwater, each strand seeming to move with its own terrible awareness. Marcus should have run. Every survival instinct screamed at him to follow the guards, to evacuate, to live. But something in her expression stopped him beneath the terrifying display of power. Beneath the crackling energy that made the air smell like ozone and burning metal, her face held an expression he recognized. He'd seen it in injured animals, in damaged plants struggling to survive desperation. Her storm-colored eyes locked onto his, and he watched them focus, both pupils finally contracting in unison, as if his presence gave her something to anchor to. "Please," she said, and her voice was raw, multi-layered, like several people speaking in almost harmony. "Make it stop. I can't. I don't want to hurt anyone else." The power flared again. A pulse that shattered 3 of his greenhouse panels and killed a section of ferns in an instant. Their green vitality sucked away until only gray husks remained. She gasped, horror flooding her features, and Marcus saw tears streaming down her face, evaporating into steam before they could fall. His mind raced, trying to understand. Everyone on the station knew about the visitor, the alien dignitary who'd arrived 6 months ago, kept in isolation in the diplomatic sector, supposedly undergoing some kind of cultural exchange. Rumors swirled, of course. Some said she was a weapon. Others claimed she was royalty from a civilization that made humanity look like children playing with rocks. The official story was that she was here to learn about Earth before formal contact between their peoples. But looking at her now, shaking and terrified and destructive, despite her obvious desire not to be, Marcus suspected the truth was something else entirely. "Okay," he said quietly, surprised his voice worked at all. "Okay, let's figure this out." He didn't move toward her, didn't make any sudden gestures. Instead, he did something that probably proved he'd lost his mind. He turned his back on her and returned to his orchid. His hands shook as he gently pressed soil around the roots, but he kept his movements calm, methodical. "You're having trouble controlling it," he said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather and not the apocalyptic energy that was making his teeth chatter from proximity. "The power? It's responding to your emotions, isn't it?" Silence behind him, except for the crackle of energy. Then cautiously, "How did you know?" Her voice was more controlled now, fewer layers, almost singular. Marcus risked a glance back and saw the silver light had dimmed slightly beneath her skin. "I work with living things," he said, turning back to the orchid. "Energy systems. Plants are all about balance. Too much water, they drown. Too little, they die. Too much light, they burn. Not enough, they starve. Control isn't about suppression. It's about flow, about finding equilibrium. He could hear her breathing now, ragged and too fast. They told me I was broken, she whispered, that my integration failed. I'm supposed to be able to contain it, but ever since I arrived in human space, it's been getting worse. The medications they gave me aren't working anymore. Today I woke up and the whole medical wing was gray, lifeless. I killed their plants, their tissue samples, nearly killed the doctor before I ran. She laughed, a broken sound. Your guards took one look at me and ran. They're trained to face down war machines, and they ran from me like I was death itself. You are, Marcus said bluntly, and felt her flinch behind him. And you're not. Energy can destroy or create. It's all about direction. He finished with the orchid and stood, finally turning to face her fully. The instinctive terror still thrummed in his bones, but he pushed through it, really looking at her. Up close, she was young, early 20s maybe, though who knew how her species aged and utterly exhausted. The silver light pulls stronger when her eyes met his, but he noticed it came in rhythm with her heartbeat, faster when she was afraid. What's your name? He asked. Lyra, she said. Lyra Thane, cultural emissary of the Stellar Collective. Her expression twisted bitterly. Though I'm not much of an emissary if I can't even walk through a room without draining the life from it, Marcus made a decision that was either brilliantly compassionate or catastrophically stupid. Come here, Lyra. Let me show you something. He gestured to the work table, to the dozens of plants in various states of care. She hesitated, fear bright in her eyes. What if I kill them? What if I kill you? Then I guess my successor will be annoyed at the mess, Marcus said, with a small smile. But I don't think you will. You've been standing there for 2 full minutes, and I'm still alive. You're already controlling it, more than you think. Slowly, like she was approaching a trap, Lyra moved forward. The silver light intensified with her anxiety, and Marcus felt a cold sensation wash over his skin, but he held still, keeping his breathing even. When she stood beside him at the work table, he could see the energy more clearly. It wasn't just light but something deeper. A fundamental force that seemed to exist between matter and energy, life and entropy. Fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Give me your hand, he said quietly. She stared at him like he'd asked her to stab him. Are you insane? I'll drain you. I'll turn you into a husk. Maybe, Marcus agreed. Or maybe you'll learn that you're not just a drain. You're also a conduit. He held out his hand, palm up, steady despite his hammering heart. This was the moment he knew. Either his instinct was right, or he'd be dead in seconds. The quotable line his mother always said echoed in his mind. Growth only happens at the edge of comfort and chaos. Lyra looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly, trembling, placed her fingers against his palm. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, like touching a live wire made of ice and lightning, a pulling sensation that seemed to reach into his cells and tug at the essential energy that made him alive. The silver light raced up his arm, and for a horrible second, he thought he'd miscalculated, that she really would kill him. But then he closed his hand around hers and said, "Don't pull, push." What? Her voice was panicked, the light intensifying. You're trying to contain it, to pull it back into yourself. That's why it bursts out too much pressure. Instead, push it through me. Let it flow. It was insane advice based on nothing but intuition and his understanding of how energy moved through living systems. But Lyra was desperate enough to try. He felt the shift immediately. Instead of pulling at his life force, the energy began to move through him, flowing from her hand into his, through his body, and then, out, down through his feet, into the floor, into the station itself. The lights in the greenhouse brightened, then normalized. The temperature regulated. And most tellingly, the orchid he'd just repotted suddenly bloomed, unfurling 3 perfect flowers in a matter of seconds. Lyra gasped, staring at the orchid. I didn't kill it. I made it grow. You're not a weapon, Marcus said softly, still holding her hand as the energy flowed through him in a steady, almost pleasant current, now that it wasn't chaotic. You're a generator. Your people must have different energy systems than humans. In your world, maybe everyone can absorb and share this power. But here, in human space, there's nowhere for it to go, so it builds up until it explodes. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by something that looked like hope and grief mixed together. My people channel through the planet's biosphere. We're connected to a living world that can absorb and redistribute the energy we produce. But here, on this metal station, surrounded by space, you're isolated, Marcus finished. Cut off from any natural system large enough to ground you. He looked around the greenhouse thoughtfully. But this station has gardens, hydroponics, biodomes, thousands of living plants maintaining the ecosystem. It's not a planet, but it's something. Over the next hour, Marcus did something that would have seemed impossible when the guards first fled past him. He taught an alien girl how to breathe. Not the physical act, but the energetic one, showing her how to sync her power with the natural rhythms around her. They moved through the greenhouse, and he had her place her hands on different plants, coaching her to feel the flow rather than the fear. Where she touched with intention and breath control, plants flourished, growing vibrant and strong. When she panicked and tried to contain the energy, it burst out destructively. It's like meditation, she said, after successfully channeling energy into a nearly dead ficus, watching it spring back to vigorous life. The silver light still pulls beneath her skin, but softer now, more rhythmic. But I've tried meditation. The doctors had me do sessions every day. They were probably teaching you to suppress and control, Marcus said. That works for behavior, for conscious action. But this is deeper than that. This is about acceptance and direction. You can't stop being what you are. Lyra, you can only learn to exist in harmony with your environment. She looked at him with an expression so vulnerable and grateful that he felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. Why did you stay? She asked. The guards are trained warriors, and they ran. You're a gardener. You should have been the first one out the door. Why did you stand your ground? Marcus considered the question, really thought about it. Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe because I've spent years learning that the most dangerous-looking things are often just struggling to survive. Roses have thorns. Venus flytraps kill. But they're not evil or broken, they're adapted to their environment. When you came through that door, I saw. He paused, trying to articulate it. I saw something beautiful, trying desperately not to hurt anyone, and failing, despite her best efforts. That's not a monster. That's just someone who needs help understanding herself. Lyra's eyes shimmered with tears that didn't evaporate this time. Her control had improved that much. On my world, I'm considered defective because I generate more energy than most. I volunteered for this exchange program because I thought maybe away from the collective, away from everyone telling me I was too much, I could find a place where I fit. Instead, I nearly killed people. I proved them all right. No, Marcus said firmly. You proved you needed a different environment, different support. That's not the same as being broken. He gestured around the greenhouse. These orchids? On their own in most Earth environments, they'd die in days. Wrong humidity, wrong temperature, wrong light. Does that make them defective? No, it makes them specialized. You're not built for metal stations and isolation. You're built for connection, for energy exchange with living systems. The greenhouse door opened cautiously, and Marcus turned to see station security, a full tactical team, weapons raised, led by Commander Reeves. A stern woman with steel gray hair and no tolerance for nonsense. Step away from the alien, Dr. Chen, she commanded. We have this contained. Marcus didn't move. Neither did Lyra, though he felt her hand tighten in his, felt the energy spike with her fear. Commander, lower your weapons, he said calmly. The situation isn't what you think. We think we have a dangerous alien entity that's already destroyed Medical Wing 3 and hospitalized Dr. Patterson, Reeves said. We have authorization to use lethal force if she can't be ray-contained. The silver light flared bright beneath Lyra's skin, and Marcus felt the pull of energy, the destructive potential building. The soldiers flinched back, and he saw the same fear in their eyes that had sent the guards running. Lyra, he said quietly, just for her. Breathe. Remember the flow. They're afraid, and fear is making you afraid, and fear disrupts the flow. But you've got this. You've been doing it for an hour now. She closed her eyes, and he watched her visibly struggle with the panic, with the instinct to either run or lash out. But slowly, the light dimmed. Her breathing evened. The deadly pull he'd felt became a gentle current again. When she opened her eyes, they were clear and focused. She looked at Commander Reeves and spoke in a steady, singular voice. I apologize for the damage I caused and the fear I've created. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I understand I'm a liability. But I'm not out of control anymore. Dr. Chen has helped me understand what was happening and how to manage it. If you'll allow it, I can demonstrate that I'm not a threat, Reeves looked skeptical, but she was also pragmatic. Demonstrate how. Lyra looked to Marcus, uncertain, and he gave her an encouraging nod. She released his hand. He felt the loss of that energy connection immediately, a surprising emptiness, and walked slowly toward the section of greenhouse she'd devastated when she first arrived. The dead gray ferns sat in their planters like skeletal remains. The security team tracked her with their weapons, fingers on triggers, and Marcus held his breath. Lyra knelt beside the dead plants and placed her hands gently on the soil. Silver light flowed down her arms, but controlled now, purposeful. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, impossibly, green began to spread through the gray husks. Cells regenerated, chlorophyll returned, and within 30 seconds the ferns were not just alive, but thriving, fuller and healthier than they'd been before. Lyra stood, and Marcus saw the exhaustion in her face, but also the quiet pride. My people are called Vitari, she said to the assembled soldiers. We're symbiotic with our world's biosphere. We generate life energy, and the planet channels it, distributes it, returns it to us in a cycle. Separated from that cycle, I became unstable, toxic. But I'm not inherently dangerous, I'm just in the wrong environment without the right support systems. Commander Reeves lowered her weapon, signaling the others to do the same. Dr. Patterson will be pleased to hear this, she said dryly. He's been insisting there had to be an explanation beyond you being a biological weapon. She studied Lyra carefully. The diplomatic implications of this situation are well above my pay grade, but I'm willing to postpone lethal containment if you're willing to work with our medical and scientific teams to establish proper protocols. Lyra nodded, relief evident in every line of her body. I am. I want to make this right. Over the following weeks, Marcus found his quiet life as a station gardener transformed into something he never could have anticipated. Lyra became a regular presence in the greenhouses, learning to manage her energy through connection with the station's botanical systems. She was a quick study, applying her own species' understanding of bioelectric fields to the techniques Marcus taught her. But more than that, they talked. He learned about the Stellar Collective, a civilization spread across 7 worlds, all connected through a shared bioenergetic network. She learned about Earth, about humanity's chaotic, disconnected approach to life and growth. They discovered shared passions. She loved music, he loved old films. She could recite poetry from memory in 3 languages, 2 of them not human. He could identify any plant by touch alone. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh in the middle of serious discussions. He had a way of seeing the wonder in small things that made her question assumptions she'd held her entire life. Somewhere between teaching her to repot succulents and her teaching him the basics of stellar meditation, something shifted. Friendship, certainly. But also something more. Something that made his heart race when she smiled at him. Something that made her voice soften when she spoke his name. The diplomatic situation resolved itself with surprising positivity. Once the collective understood that Lyra's instability came from environmental incompatibility, not inherent defect, they worked with human scientists to develop hybrid living spaces, sections of the station modified with biosynthetic elements that could channel and distribute Vitari energy. Other Vitari diplomats arrived, and with proper support systems, the cultural exchange program flourished. But Lyra spent most of her time in the gardens with Marcus. I could go home, she said one evening, as they worked together, transplanting seedlings under the soft glow of grow lights. The collective has offered to recall me. Let me return to the homeworld. They've apologized for sending me without proper support. I'd be welcome back. Marcus's hands stilled in the soil, something cold settling in his chest. But I don't want to, she said softly. She set down her trowel and looked at him, really looked at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes reminded him of that first day when she'd stood terrified in the doorway. On my world, I'm too much. I generate more energy than most Vitari, and even with the planetary network, I've always felt like I'm overflowing, like I have to constantly hold back. But here, with these gardens, with this work, she gestured around the greenhouse, at the thriving plants, at the beauty they'd created together. I can give everything I have, and it's not too much. It's needed. It's valued. She paused, and he saw color rise in her cheeks, a very human gesture her time here had taught her. And if I'm honest, it's not just the work. Marcus. Everyone else ran from me. Trained soldiers, experienced diplomats, medical professionals, they all saw me as a threat, as something to be contained or eliminated. But you stood your ground. You looked at me and saw someone worth helping. You taught me that I wasn't broken, just misunderstood. You gave me. She struggled for words. You gave me roots when I felt like I was floating away into nothing. Marcus set down his own tools and moved closer to her, his heart pounding. Lyra, I stood my ground because running felt like abandoning something precious. I didn't know you then, but I felt like I knew what you were going through, that sense of being too much, of not fitting, of trying so hard to be what others need that you lose sight of what you are. He smiled slightly. I'm a guy who talks to plants for a living. I've never been what people expected either. And these last weeks with you have been. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. The familiar flow of energy moved between them, warm and right. They've been the best weeks I can remember. You're brilliant and funny, and you see beauty in things most people overlook. When you're here, the gardens feel more alive. I feel more alive. Lyra's fingers tightened around his, and the silver light beneath her skin pulsed brighter, but not with fear or instability, with joy. On my world, when two Vitari want to declare their intention to bond, they plant something together. Something that will outlive them, that will grow and flourish as a symbol of what they're building. She glanced around the greenhouse, at the hundreds of plants they'd already tended together, and laughed. I suppose we've been bonding for weeks without realizing it. Marcus felt a smile spread across his face, broad and genuine. I suppose we have. Though maybe we should make it official. There's a seed bank I've been wanting to access. They have samples from Earth's rarest botanical specimens. We could germinate something truly special. Together, they chose a giant sequoia seed, genetic material from trees that lived thousands of years, that grew to touch the sky. Under proper conditions, it would take decades to reach maturity, centuries to reach its full potential, a living promise of the future they were choosing to build. Together in the quiet greenhouse, surrounded by the life they'd nurtured, Marcus and Lyra planted the seed in specially prepared soil. Her hands glowed silver as she channeled pure life energy into the earth. His hands, steady and sure from years of practice, guided the process with knowledge and care. 3 months later, the tiny sequoia seedling stood 6 inches tall in its planter, thriving under their combined attention. The station had transformed, incorporating Vitari biotechnology throughout its systems, becoming a hybrid space where humans and Stellark could work together seamlessly. Lyra had officially been appointed Chief Botanical Integration Specialist, a made-up title that basically meant she did what she'd been doing anyway, helping living things flourish in unlikely places. Marcus remained head gardener, perfectly content with his role. They'd moved in together, combining their quarters into a space that was half garden, half living area, and entirely theirs. On the evening that Station Command formally announced the permanent alliance between Earth and the Stellark Collective, with their station serving as the joint headquarters, Marcus found Lyra on their balcony overlooking the main biodome. She stood silhouetted against the soft glow of artificial sunset, her silver hair moving in the ventilation currents, and he was struck again by how someone so otherworldly had become his entire world. Thinking about that first day? He asked, moving to stand beside her. She leaned into him, and he wrapped an arm around her waist, the energy exchange between them as natural as breathing now. Thinking about how the best thing that ever happened to me started with me being completely out of control and terrified, she said. Thinking about how everyone else saw a monster, but you saw someone who needed help. She turned to face him, her storm-colored eyes bright with emotion. Thinking about how grateful I am that you stood your ground. Marcus kissed her forehead gently. Growth only happens at the edge of comfort and chaos, he quoted. You taught me that edge isn't a place to fear, it's where the most beautiful things take root. Below them, the biodome flourished, earth plants and Stellark biotechnology growing together in impossible harmony, creating something neither world could have achieved alone. It was messy and unpredictable and absolutely thriving, much like what Marcus and Lyra had built together. The elite guards had fled from her, seeing only danger in what they didn't understand. But the human gardener had stood his ground, seeing potential in the chaos, beauty in the struggle, and life waiting to flourish if only someone was brave enough to help it grow. And in the end, standing firm in the face of fear hadn't just saved Lyra, it had given them both roots deep enough to weather anything, and room enough to reach for the stars together.